I have a confession to make, really. It's not something that I'm very proud of, but I still need to let it off my heart. I'm a politician. I didn't really intend for my life to end up that way, you know. It started with just being upset about some things and discussing these things I were upset about with friends and colleagues over a beer or over schnapps or wine on Friday nights, on Saturday nights. And then, before I knew it, I was starting to discuss politics over coffee, at work, with my friends, and it gradually took over my life. And before I knew it, I had started a new global movement that has taken seats in parliaments on all levels and has spread to 60 countries. It can happen to anybody in this room. And here's how. Before we start, I'm Falkvinge. I founded the Swedish and original Pirate Party. I'm now a political evangelist, speaking about the ideas, and not just the ideas, but also the leadership methods that allowed us to dropkick the incumbent, rich and powerful institutions. I'm Falkvinge on Twitter. I love seeing my name on Twitter. Feel free to say something on Twitter when you agree with me, when you disagree with me, or not agree at all. So, to kick this off, just to get a feel for the room, how many in here have heard of the Swedish Pirate Party before? Let's see, show hands. Okay, that's roughly 1/2 to 2/3, which, interestingly enough, regardless of where I'm present in the entire world, from Hong Kong to San Francisco, this ratio is consistent. It's 1/2 to 2/3 of the audience have heard of the Swedish Pirate Party before. To get that in context, how many in here have heard of any other Swedish political party before? Anybody? Well, yeah, that's typically it. It's typically scattered hands. And this is so consistent that I put it in the slides before the presentation, no matter where I present in the world, because this is what it looks like everywhere. Isn't that kind of funny? I mean, we are an activist group. We went from being political lunatics to being an established group in Parliament, but still somehow out on the fringe. I mean, we're not anywhere a majority party, yeah? But we're still getting elected. We're getting people in Parliament. And that's kind of creating headlines, because we came from nowhere. So, a brief introduction is that we love the net, we love copying and sharing, and we love civil liberties. For that, some people try to call us pirates, try to make us bow down in shame over what we saw as important, what we saw as our core values. That didn't work pretty well. We decided to stand tall about it instead. And as a result, we now have 2 people in the European Parliament. That was the first major success. We have 200 people in other kinds of parliaments, everything from local councils across Europe to state parliaments to national parliaments and senates. We are represented on every level, conceivable level in Europe, somewhere in Europe, and we're learning this game at a speed that frightens the established institutions. And we enjoy the fact that it frightens the established institutions. So, the first pirate party was the Swedish Pirat Party, founded 7 years ago, almost to the date. It was founded on January 1st, 2006. So, we're going to take a little look at why was this important? What is net liberty about, really? Why does it engage so many people? And then, looking at it from my personal perspective, what do you experience as an entrepreneur when you go through something like this, when you find yourself in the eye of the tornado, and finally extrapolating to how those experiences translate to your businesses, your ideas, and your visions for making a better world. So let's hit it. What we are demanding at its core isn't rocket science. When you're looking at the analog letter, the letter you put in the mail 40 years ago with a seal on it in wax, very pretty. This had certain characteristics to it. This letter was anonymous. You and you alone would determine whether you identified yourself as sender of this letter on the outside of the envelope for the world to know, on the inside of the letter for only the recipient to know, or frankly not at all. This was your prerogative, and it was an important civil liberty to be able to send letters anonymously to tip off the press, to express your love for somebody, and a myriad of other uses. It was secret in transit. Nobody would open the letter in transit just to make sure you didn't send anything illegal. The postal services of most countries are still those countries' largest distributor of narcotics, because letters are secret in transit and we hold this as sacred. Granted, if you were under previous suspicion of a serious crime, your letters could be opened after a long bureaucratic process, but no single letter would be opened to check if you committed a new crime in that letter. It does not happen. It is untracked. Nobody had the capability nor the resources to see who was sending letters to whom, who was communicating with whom. In China, by contrast, a friend who moved there tells me that whenever they want to send a letter in the mail, they have to go to the postmaster, the post office, and enter themselves in a logbook where they enter who are they sending this mail to, when did they send it, and who are they. Here, in the Western tradition, that does not happen. Last but not least, the mailman was never responsible for the contents of a message. This is something we hold sacred, the messenger immunity. A messenger is never responsible, neither for a message that they have to remember to bring to the target, or, with the case of a mailman, a sealed letter, where they're not even allowed to open it and see what it contains. These are 4 principles that we hold as sacred and inviolable in the analog world. So tell me, why does this not also apply to the digital world? Is there a legal difference? There isn't. Is there a principle difference? There isn't. So, our point is that it's absolutely reasonable that our children inherit these fundamental civil liberties that our parents enjoyed, even if they are communicating in a different physical form of letter. And when you suggest this, some people go ballistic. They go just through the roof. In particular, the copyright industry says that if you allow anybody to send anything to anybody, we can't make any money. And I say, so what? We don't determine civil liberties from whether somebody can profit if they are sustained. The role of an entrepreneur is to make money given the current constraints of society. They do not get to dismantle civil liberties, even if they cannot make money otherwise. It doesn't work that way. If the copyright industry cannot make money in the face of sustained civil liberties, they have two choices. They get to go out of business, or they get to try making money another way, maybe by selling mayonnaise. I don't care. And this fact that the copyright industry had their politicians in their pocket is making the entire net generation absolutely furious. They're seeing their civil liberties being dismantled before their eyes. Civil liberties that our parents enjoyed and held as sacred. And they can't see that private communication is private communication, whether it happens online or whether it happens in the old analog letter. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't enjoy the same protection for the digital letter as for the analog one. So that is the fundamental ideological base, which, frankly, makes millions of people really upset when politicians threaten it. So looking at my personal journey to putting people in Parliament, there were three things that happened going from an ugly web page, and it was seriously ugly. It was seriously ugly. This was what I launched on January 1st, 2006. Almost to the day, 7 years ago, to having people in Parliament. There were three things that happened in 2005. There was yet another harshening of the copyright monopoly in Sweden, making... There was yet another harshening of the copyright monopoly in Sweden, making downloading illegal. That was essentially catering to the established distribution methods and striking a blow against indie artists who depended on getting word of mouth out and having alternate revenue streams. Patent monopolies on software in the European Union. Now we managed to avert those, but only by a very narrow margin. Essentially, there were so many amendments into this directive that would enable patent monopolies on software, strategically replacing a number of words like always with never, and will with won't. And it was such a spaghetti of such 180-degree amendments that even the groups who wanted patent monopolies on software, they knew they couldn't be sure in the end what they would be voting for. So they decided to strike, they decided to kill the entire bill rather than risk getting an undecided result, which was a form of political victory. Copyright monopoly harshening, I spoke about that. And on December 14, 2005, something called the Data Retention Directive was enacted in the European Parliament. That turned our mobile phones from being communications devices to being governmental tracking devices. And that was unheard of. If a politician had suggested that before September 11, 2001, his or her political career would have ended within 10 seconds. Now, however, it's somehow motivated with tracking and surveillance has gone from being motivated with catching bad criminals to because we like it. And even because it can be done. And what I realized was that people here are just people. Nobody was being evil. They were just building what they thought would be a better world. And I was just vehemently disagreeing with them. So I posted that manifesto. I announced it with 2 lines in a chat channel, and that was all the advertising I ever did. Hey, look, the Pirate Party has its website up now after New Year's. That ugly website we just saw. And the address. And it just detonated. I had 300 activists overnight holding out their palms like this, figuratively, and wanting to be a part of this. I was just in the storm of the tornado, the eye of the tornado. On the 3rd day, my photo was in a Pakistani paper. I had no idea what was going on. So, still, I managed to realize this. And I did so by new leadership methods that essentially trust people to realize your vision without much interference or any micromanagement from you. and this couldn't have been done otherwise. I realized this was my chance to change the world. I mean, I had a high-paying IT job at the time. I was quite comfortably living the rat race. But if I hadn't taken this chance to change the world, when I had the people who wanted to help me do it, I would not have been able to see myself in the mirror. It was a choice, but it was only a choice in theory. If I hadn't taken this chance, my whole life would have been a what if. So, I quit my job and took a huge loan. In that order, very important. Took a loan and quit, and I decided to go for it. And I did this using swarm management. I did this by trusting people and say, hey guys, we can do this together. And then just trusting people to do their little part. When 30,000 people make a phone call, that's not a lot of effort for each and every one of them. But for the political office receiving 30,000 calls, they are horrified. You can have a shitload of fun using these techniques, and they don't cost you a lot either. Elections 2006 came around. We had been hoping to get into Parliament on the first time. I mean, it was 8 months away when we started. You know, we come from the net. We're used to changing the world on a weekend. 8 months, that's a truckload of time, right? Turns out that politics doesn't work quite like that. So we got 0.6%. We were kind of disappointed at that at the time, but we still finished in the top 10. And more importantly, we realized what a feat we'd made as the media attitude towards us changed overnight. They'd gone from, Rick, we have a slot here in the radio studio in 90 minutes. Can you make it to the studio in 90 minutes? And I was like on the other side of town, and I just threw everything I had and jumped into a taxi, and I might make it. After the election, I got calls from the large news studios, as Reuters, Associated Press, Agence France-Presse. And they asked me, sir, would you possibly have a slot in your calendar somewhere in the next 2 weeks where we can come and interview you? So I realized that we'd actually done quite well. And that was true. 3 years, oh yeah, I ran out of money, I ran out of the loan. I mean, it was only supposed to last until the elections, right? But when you're leading a swarm, people trust you. People want you to lead that swarm. So I asked the swarm for money. I asked them, people who wanted me to do this, to deposit 10 euros at the end of the month to my account. So, essentially, I lived off of begging for 18 months. And of course, this tabloid scandalized me for it, right? He's living off of begging. Yeah, but it was quite an honest way to make a living. People support you for doing what you do. Also, it kind of shows the passion you have in the most entrepreneurial spirit as you do this. Then came the European elections in 2009. We got 3.5 years after our founding, we became the largest party for people under 30. The most coveted age group. We had 7.13% in total, and 25% of the most coveted youth group. What's funny here is our election budget. We had an election budget of 50,000 euros, mostly gathered from poor students who contributed whatever they could afford. Our competition had 6 million in election budget, and we beat them. That tells you something about how efficient and how radical these management methods are. We were literally more than 2 orders of magnitude more cost efficient in an apples-to-apples comparison. And if you go beyond the apples-to-apples comparison, you can also observe that we obtained this result in half the time of the competition. Less than 1% in half the time. This was followed by successes all over Europe, and The German Piratenpartei has gotten into 4 state parliaments. The Czech Pirate Party has gotten into their Senate. We are on local councils pretty much all over Europe, including here in Spain and in Catalonia. So these leadership methods and these ideas are very, very powerful. We've been described as the fastest growing political movement. Right. And as a result of these very tangible successes, I've also personally received a number of awards afterwards, like Time magazine shortlisted me for one of the world's most influential people. I was named a top global thinker by Foreign Policy, IT Person of the Year by Swedish IT industry, and so on and so forth. So, if you use these methods in your passion to change the world, you'll see results. So, what do we learn? There is a quote from Futurama, which very much applies here. And it says, and you can actually look this up, this seriously is a quote from Futurama. When push comes to shove, you gotta do what you love, even when it's not a good idea. I mean, seriously, who in their right frame of mind thinks they can change the world by founding a political party? What kind of idiot is that? Well, apparently this kind of idiot. There's another saying that ties right into that, which says that if it's stupid but works, then it ain't stupid. So what we learned is that people are not even. Even your worst adversaries are not evil. And painting them in that light does not define them. But it does something else. It defines you. It defines you. And whether or not whether you believe that you can or cannot change the world, I'm going to bet real money that you're right. This is a matter of attitude. This is a matter of realizing that your adversaries they don't hold any genetic advantage over you. At the end of the day, it's the passion that matters. It's the power to inspire other people. So what if they have truckloads of money? If you can inspire 10,000 activists and change the world. Their truckloads of money can only hire so many yawning workers, so many yawning election workers. Whereas the people who follow you will go an extra mile to make change happen in the world. So this is about leadership. This is about standing up and saying, I'm going to change the world. Who's with me? And you'll see literally tens of thousands of people wanting to be a part of it. And that can change the world. You might not be able to do it alone, but your passion, when it shines through the burning of your heart, through the depths of your eyes, and people can see that, you're not alone. You'll never be alone if you can show the passion for making a better world. There are 4 things that are required to make this happen. Your vision needs to be tangible, it needs to be inclusive, it needs to be credible, and it needs to be epic. Those 4 components. And taking a look at them, it needs to be tangible. Let's go to the moon. There's a solid thing that we can make happen. Anybody in this room can start a project to go to the moon. Because it would energize people. It will make people want to do this. And it's a very concrete thing, rather, guys, let's make a better world or something. Going to the moon is tangible. It's inclusive. If you pose a list of things that need to be done, everybody can see something in that list and think, hey, I can do that. if you provide an avenue for them for helping out, they will do so, because they want to see this happen. It needs to be credible. From the get-go, you need to post a line from A to B, a straight line from A to B with a number of steps in between, where everybody can see that every single step you take you closer to the goal. If you can take this impossible thing and break it down into what looks like a project, then you can execute it like a project. So what if you need €1 million, as long as you know that you need €1 million? And last but not least, it needs to be epic. There's this saying, shoot for the moon. I disagree with that. I disagree strongly with shooting for the moon. People have already been on the moon. Everybody knows that. Shoot for Mars. That's epic. That's the level of epic we're looking for here. Change the world. You want to end illiteracy. Teach 2 billion people to read. Go ahead and do it. You want to bring light and heating, artificial heating, to 1 billion people on the planet. Perfectly doable. What about clean water? All of this is perfectly doable. And you don't have to think in terms of helping 2 people. Think in terms of helping 2 billion people. And you'll realize, as you start to break down the problem, that it's perfectly doable. Use a swarm. I sometimes tell executives of large companies that you think that your greatest asset is your employees, and you're wrong. Your greatest asset is all of the people who want to work for you for free, but that you're not letting them work for you. Look at Microsoft, just to take one example. If they would open up the source code to their Windows operating system tomorrow, they would overnight get tens of thousands of new developers. Granted, they would sacrifice part of their strategy. But that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at how to create unstoppable movements of people who want to change the world. And money will only take you so far. A swarm is empowered. You don't get to tell people what to do. Anybody who's worked in project management can see the magic when you tell a room full of thousands of people about your vision, and you see them energized. You see blue sparks of energy crackle between them. They look high with this passion, and they probably feel high too about it. If you allow them, they'll just start executing your vision without you interfering. And that's how you get the 2 orders of magnitude of cost efficiency. I'm writing a book on this subject that's going to be published later in this year with a lot more hands-on approach as to how you manage these swarm techniques. If, I say this as a bit of a surprise, if anybody in this conference is interested in getting a free copy electronically, write swarm-wise on one of your business cards and hand it to me, and I will send you a copy. Otherwise, it's going to be available later, sometime later this year. I can't promise you exactly when. So, for final words, we can observe that change doesn't just happen. Somebody makes it happen every single time. And the question I want you to ask yourselves as you leave this conference is, do you want to be that person? Because that's the only thing you need to be certain of. Thank you.
Wow.